I'm excited to introduce to the stage Mickey Johnson and Jackson Solway. They are hiding over in the door. I received an email about their company Parsecco shutting down, and I definitely wanted to reach out to them and get their story. When they sent their story to me, I was amazed. I heard in it myself and every startup founder that I've met. They have probably worked with just about every founder archetype that is known. So they probably have worked with someone that defines who you are as a founder at some point. And through that challenge and that development, they've learned what kind of questions you need to be asking yourself and your founders to make sure that you have a team that's set up for success rather than failure. So without further ado, I welcome to the stage Mickey Johnson and Jackson Solway of Parsecco.
Hello, hello.
Hello?
Awesome. Now let me get your slides up since we need slides.
Cool.
That would be great. And you're going to do them for us?
I will.
Cool. Hi, everybody.
Hi there. Good morning.
Good morning. They've got it kind of chilly in here to keep you all awake. I see, I knew.
I think we're going to stand for the first half.
Yep.
Yep.
I think people will get it. I'm Mickey. That's
I'm
Jackson.
Jackson.
So, hi, everybody. I am, as I just said, Mickey Johnson, and I am the former CEO of Parsecco.
And I'm Jackson Solway. I handled product and operations for Parsecco.
So Jackson and I started dating in December of 2011, and all of 4 months later, we decided to move to Chicago and start a company together. Now it's about a year and a half later, and we are engaged, and the company is no longer around, hence us being here. And we're back in San Francisco permanently, which we're super happy about because we get to do things like this. Parsecco was a social network for creative professionals based around the Collaborative Project. And we could tell you plenty of things about mistakes that we made with the actual product. But instead, as Cass mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the lessons we learned with building a team.
So the great thing about our mistakes is that, at least in retrospect, a lot of them are both predictable and avoidable. So you may be thinking right off the bat here that it is insane to start a company with your significant other. But we didn't stop there. So our team actually ballooned to 6 co-founders over the next couple months. And we experienced pretty much every permutation of classic co-founder relationship in the book. At the end, there were just 2 of us, and Mickey wasn't one of them. We'll get to that. I think our message here today is to really encourage you to pay attention to the warning signs that we ignored.
And kind of the best way that we could think of to do that is to just go through and point out some of the things that went wrong with each of our co-founders. And clearly, we want to say this is just our side of the story and a total oversimplification. Our team was amazing, and most of us are still friends, but in the interest of time, we're going to kind of focus on the negative. But I think that's why we're here today, right? That's kind of the point. But and in case you think that we're just sort of blaming everyone else for what went wrong, we will be putting ourselves in the hot seat in the second half of this whole thing, so stay tuned. So first up, we get another one, sorry, I'm one behind, is Peter, who is our awesome technical co-founder, amazing coder, and a friend of Jackson's from college, which is how we found him. But we probably should have known, knowing Peter, that VC-funded, get big fast kind of startup is not going to be right for him. He had always had a really great office job, and he actually really loved it. I think in part because he somehow ended up with one that gave him a lot of autonomy. And so when you go to a startup with 5 co-founders, you suddenly lose a lot of that autonomy because there's a lot of conversations about everything. And on top of that, you also lose the stability. So he just was one of those people who was kind of stressed out, not having like 6 months of savings in the bank all the time. And if any of you have startups, you probably know that that's really unlikely if you have a startup. So that was kind of the first problem. Next.
W. There was more to his name than that, but we'll leave it there. So we met W at a networking event, which is one of those like rare things that never happens with co-founders, but it did to us. And he had already started 2 successful small businesses, which we thought was pretty impressive considering he was still a junior in college. Our first hint that something was amiss, though, was when we began to negotiate a compensation package for him as a co-founder. And in short, he bargained hard, like really hard. So what was up with this? As we thought into it, we realized that as we were calling him a co-founder, he was treating us as employers. And later, it turned out that when he began tuning out in meetings, we realized that his interest in the vision of the company wasn't where ours was. He really just wanted to code. And this would have been fine had we actually known this and not called him a co-founder. Fair enough. But now we had a set of founding docs and a cap table with an extra co-founder on it. And this actually turned out to be a huge problem for both investors and incubators that we applied to.
So Jackson found Elle, our designer, on Dribbble, and she agreed to at least do the initial mock-ups for the site for free as part of her portfolio, and we all said we'd just kind of see where it went from there. And her mock-ups were great, except that a little ways into it, they just kind of stopped coming. We'd always wanted her to become a co-founder, but she never committed the way that any of us did, and we weren't paying her. So we probably shouldn't have been surprised that her client work always took precedence over what we were asking her to do. But still, when she finally did just totally stop working with us halfway through, we were left in the lurch and went back to those fun 3-hour conversations about what color to make the sign-in button.
Alexis. So it's worth saying up front here that the way this relationship ended was by far the hardest of all of our co-founder relationships. And I think Mickey and I actually feel pretty bad about how it went down. Interesting enough, Alexis is here today. I don't know where you are, Alexis. Hey, Alexis. And even more interesting, we actually haven't seen each other since the company dissolved. So, again. So you guys know, we did talk, we emailed beforehand, and Alexis does support us doing our best to give a version of this story. So this isn't totally out of the blue. Alexis had been working on a very similar idea to Parsecco for almost 4 years when we first met her. And the difference was that she didn't have a team. Now we had each other. She knew the market we were entering like the back of her hand. She has an incredible background in user experience design and really had connections in the startup world that we could only dream of. The problem was that, like Mickey and me, she was used to being in charge. Fair enough. But different from us, her conversation style was new. It was what I think she called debate, and she legitimately saw it as debate. For the rest of the team, though, we started to feel steamrolled. And at first, this was great. It was a way to shake up the company, and we were really excited to re-examine the assumptions we had made, like the foundation of our product. But soon, it started to feel like we were going in circles, and then nowhere at all. So in September of 2012, last year, we asked Alexis to leave our team. And this was every bit as hard as a breakup, or you might even say a divorce. And it hurt bad.
So at the time, as you might imagine, we were really glad that we had really great lawyers who knew startup law and that we had all created founding docs that protected the company over any individual founder. And those are important things. You just don't want legal stuff getting in the way when everything else is hard enough in a moment like this. But I really think that the bigger lesson was a much more personal one. And that's that you cannot let anyone in the company make big, life-changing decisions if you have any reservations whatsoever. So less than a month before we asked Alexis to leave the team, she actually decided with all of us to move across the country from San Francisco to Chicago to work with the company full-time. And I think that that really should have been an opportunity for all of us to slow down and think about what the real implications of that were. And also to just be pretty brutally honest with each other. And instead, we did what I think a lot of startups do, which is we just kind of crossed our fingers and jumped. And that, I think, is something that Jackson and I still really regret. And actually kind of want to take a moment to just say that we're sorry to Alexis. And I knew this was going to happen. And that we're glad that you're here.
Sorry, Alexis.
And then finally, something that I do think that we did right, which was something we kind of jokingly came to call feeling your feelings. But it's basically just that, especially in the really early days of a startup, it's a lot more like a relationship than it is like a job. And you got to take time to talk about not just how the business is doing, but how you're feeling. And so an easy way that we did this is just like a little tip, is we did something called 3 words. Which was that at the beginning of every meeting, we would just take a minute and everybody would say 3 words that described how they were feeling. And that would just kind of get it on the table and get it out of the way so you could go on to the real business at hand. So like right now, I would say, I'm feeling a little embarrassed that I'm crying in front of all of you, but I'm super excited to be here and glad that this is going to be over in about 4 minutes. And and also, I'm actually really proud too because my parents happen to be in the audience today.
So all this talking and feeling and like woo-woo stuff. As a guy, I was pretty skeptical at first, I'll admit. But it turns out that I've come around completely, and that's because through these conversations, Mickey and I have realized we're very different people. And when we look at these differences, they all seem to come back to one central conflict. And that's this. It's get big fast versus organic growth. Now, these are the kinds of companies that you have the option of creating. Get big fast is venture capital track, you might say land grab, San Francisco, what people are known for doing in this environment here in the Bay. Organic growth is not that. It's actually what 99% of the world does when they create a business, and there's nothing wrong with that. The issue, however, is that the different companies require different logics? Different kinds of logic for making decisions. And the big lesson is that you can't be both. So we learned about this from watching a video by Joel Spolsky from Startup School, 2012. You can Google it after this. We highly recommend it. He asked one big question, which we will suggest you pose to yourselves as well, and it's, which kind of company do I want to be? And if you and your co-founders have different answers to this question, run like hell. or really stay friends, but know that the company can only have one of you. I think we learned this the hard way, and we highly recommend, again, you can only have one.
So as you might have guessed, it turns out that Jackson is pretty much the poster boy for Get Big Fast. And I am 100% an organic growth kind of girl. So Parsecco was pretty much doomed from the start. And it turns out that Alexis and Peter and W and L made their biggest mistake when they agreed to work with the 2 of us. Speaking of which, just to kind of finish out this story, after Alexis left the team, we took a small friends and family round, a lot of which went back out the door to pay W. I went to San Francisco to look for funders, and somewhere in all of that realized that I just wasn't into this get big fast thing. And so I stepped back as CEO. And then Peter and Jackson continued on for a little bit after that, except that then eventually Peter realized that he also was not into get big fast, and Jackson still was. And so when we say that this is something that you are not going to be able to get over, we're saying it from a lot of experience. But there is a silver lining to all of this. We've taken the differences that we've learned about ourselves and created 3 questions that you can ask yourselves or your co-founders. It can kind of help you get a sense of which way you might fall, which side of the fence. And so we're going to answer those questions for you right now and just see how they sound a little bit. Do you want to sit down?
Sure.
Okay. So first, where are we on it? You got it?
Yeah. This is a pretty big question, you may notice. And I think it highlights our differences in a very stark way, and that's why we chose it. So, how do I judge my value? It's one thing to write this on a card before you're in front of an audience, but to actually say it is something else. I feel like I'm on a mission from God. Just minus the God part. But really, I see a troubled world, I see problems, and my instinct is to fix them. I believe inherently that people are good, and so long as I have resources, I believe it's my, you might even say, responsibility to help. So, to give an example of this, I think government is cool because it's so damn big. So who else has the capability to run such massive experiments, you might say, or who else can bring something to scale so quickly? And these kinds of prospects get me very excited. The problem, of course, is that I don't trust politicians. But if you're catching on here, my solution to this is simply to fix politics. And then I'll solve world hunger and cure cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So how do I judge my value? If on my deathbed, that is 300 years in the future on a colonized Mars, and I can look back at all the problems we solved, I'll consider that pretty good.
So I, on the other hand, am kind of skeptical of this whole idea of human advance in general. I think that we as a species tend to make kind of as many mistakes as we do good decisions in the world. And that doesn't mean that I'm not totally fascinated by individual people and feel really driven to help them. It's just that I want to help a much smaller group of people and in a much more direct way. I'm much more interested in being able to see the impact I'm having and feel like those people are impacting me too. But if you're going for VC funding, growth is going to be put in front of that kind of thing a lot. And so you've heard of, delayed gratification. This was sort of delayed validation for me. It was like I just felt like I was always making these sacrifices. And if you're not feeling like you're saving the world to do it, it's just kind of painful.
So startups have this reputation, and I'm totally guilty of perpetuating this, you might say. It's that they grow really, really fast, and they exit really, really big, and they're these huge world-changing things. And in practice, I gotta call bullshit a little bit. In reality, if a company is going to succeed, you're spending the next 10 years of your life, 60 hours a week, making that happen. And if you're not ready for that, you're going to have one foot out the door mentally, and that's the beginning of the end. So on this question, for me, I say yes, but only because it's not work if I'm kicking ass. which is really cheesy to say, I know. But if I love my work, so long as, well, if I love my work, there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's nuance. You got to work smart, not hard, and sometimes 60 hours a week is not smart. But I think I really play the long game here and go for maximum impact. And if that time is required, I'm happy to give it.
So, as you might guess, if Jackson won the lottery today, he would wake up tomorrow and go right back to work. Nothing would change. Me, if I won the lottery, I would spend the rest of my life reading in the bath and like going to yoga workshops. Like seriously.
Not a joke.
Which does not mean that I don't work really hard. I do, and I have it. But I have to have a really clear reason why I'm doing that, I realized. Either I'm getting paid, or I'm having a really tangible, direct impact on people's lives, or ideally both. But at a startup, it was like I was getting neither. And for me, that meant that I just lost motivation really quickly. And then I ended up just kind of feeling crappy all the time because I wasn't like killing myself and pulling all-nighters all the time like Jackson and the rest of the team.
Thanks. Failure to me, I think it just helps me hone my vision. It's kind of that simple. It helps more that I have these big, dangerous moral visions. Lots of easy paths to criticism here, I know. But in a lot of ways, they can't fail. I can fail in my execution, but so long as those visions are still a remote possibility, I don't take it personally. And I think that's key. Where do I get this? I look back at playing Connect 4 with my dad when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And finally one day I realized that he was letting me win, and I just freaked out. And I think that's because he wasn't giving me his full effort, his full challenge. I wanted that. I wanted to feel like I was really being challenged. And from this, I took this sense that the best thing, maybe the most we could ever do, is simply to try.
So me, I hate losing. I have pretty much vowed to never play Scrabble with Jackson again because he always beats me and I always get mad, and then he's always really confused about why I'm not like grateful for all these great lessons that I'm learning.
Keys, the 2-letter words.
But seriously, I mean, he's right. What this goes back to is that I have huge trouble separating the failure of a project and my personal failure. And that's okay. It's great for some things like coaching and writing heartfelt blog posts, which I do a lot of. But when you're at a startup and you're taking those just like daily knocks, it is rough to be like that. So, you know, you're probably not going to look exactly like Jackson or I, but I hope that we've at least convinced you to take a minute and just think about some of these bigger questions. And if you did have a moment where you were like, oh man, that's totally me, trust that instinct and be really honest with yourself. Because yes, you have an amazing product that could honestly change the world, but right now the decisions you're making are definitely going to change your life and your family's life and your co-founder's life. And I think we all need to remember that those are just as important as the big decisions you're making for your company. So that's it, and thank you so much for being here. We're going to take some questions.
Cool. We have like 4 mics. Holy moly! I don't need to take your mic. I didn't know that. So we have mic standard runners here. If people have questions, this is a 5-minute Q&A session. Ask your questions.
I see one in the middle.
Great talk, thank you. You didn't talk about why the company failed. You said you weren't going to talk about the product failed. Do you think that if you'd had a different set of founders or a different combination, fewer maybe, you had a chance?
Okay, go first.
Yeah, I think if it had been Jackson and not me, that he very well could have taken this idea and kept it going for a really long time. I mean, I think what I learned about the sort of get big fast idea, or we could call it lean methodology, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, is that it's not about the idea, it's about having zero ego and being willing to throw away that idea and really figure out what's the product market fit. You know, you have a market that you're interested in. How do you really listen to what they need and not get caught up in what you think is the right way to fix that problem? And Jackson's great at that. I am not so much. And I think by the time that we had sort of gotten our minds how we were going to fix it, we were a little too far into it to sort of say like, oh, I want a lifestyle company and you want a get big fast company. We'd actually been trying to ride that line between those for too long already. But so it's not so much about like us or like could we have done it, but it's really about that mindset of being willing to, because I mean, you know, he could have pivoted 10 more times if he'd had someone to code to like do that with him, I think.
Just to be clear, we really don't mean to blame anyone on our team. It's easy to say in retrospect that like so-and-so screwed something up or like something happened at a bad moment, but I think the ideal co-founding team is 2, something I was told over and over again before we started. We had 6. That's ridiculous. Don't do it. Do 2, maybe 3.
Thank you again for this talk.
Thanks.
I have a question around when did you decide to like cut it off? Like, what was the moment where, was it money? Was it what happened to be like, this is it?
Yeah, go for it again. Megan.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll tell you, I've actually written a rather long blog post about this on Medium a couple of weeks ago. But basically, I went out to San Francisco to get funders, and before we really even met with anybody, we had a talk about the money that we had taken in and realized that we had, like I said, we had money out to co-founders and we had lawyers to pay and all sorts of stuff, and that we weren't going to be able to take that money and start paying ourselves, which was really the goal after a year of not getting paid. And so we were like, okay, well, maybe we should talk about getting part-time jobs, which was something that we'd never wanted to do before. And so I started thinking about what I might do for a part-time job, and I got so much more excited about those prospects than I had been about the company in like months, that it was just like this big alarm bell went off in my head. And I basically like a couple days later called these guys and I was just like, I don't want to be CEO anymore. Like I'll be in the mix, but Jackson took over as CEO for a while, and then he and Peter pivoted, and then basically the same thing happened like a month later.
With Peter. Peter and I were working for maybe 6 weeks until he finally, after a lot of long discussions about Mickey, came around to her exact perspective on startups, and went and took an awesome day job in Chicago. Like maybe that's not the best way to put it. Like he loves it. It's great. It's just not a startup.
Yeah, which is cool. Anybody else? I saw one more up here.
So it sounds like the two of you have maybe slightly different views on identifying with a startup or identifying with a product.
Slightly.
And I know that sometimes good product comes from really putting yourself into it, but if what you put yourself into fails, how do you maybe have some advice on how to not let that pull you down as well?
I think I might have started to get at this with one of my answers to these questions. For me, it's you got to learn to not take it personally, basically, and it's easy to do that when you believe in your idea in a more abstract way. Like today, I root for people and I consult with people who are tackling our same market and our same problem. And that's exciting to me. It's a way for the project of Parsecco to live on. The fact that I'm not doing it, for whatever reason, I'm able to separate myself from that.
Yeah, and just to jump in a little bit, I'll say what I think everyone will say, but it's pretty true, which is that the way I come to terms with it, since I'm not like him, is that I learned a lot. Like I really did. I am in a totally different place in my life than I would be before. And I live in San Francisco. There's a good chance I would have worked for a startup at some point. So at least to be able to come into that and be like, nope, I know this is not right for me. This is like, that is invaluable for me. But I don't want to sort of BS you guys either. It was really, really rough. And it was really rough because I was actually in San Francisco by myself for 2 weeks when this all really went down. And I took a lot of hot baths and went to a lot of yoga classes. I mean, seriously. Anyway, so thank you all again.
Thank you.
Yep.
You can put it on the chair. You're good.